I imagine the job of a right-wing commentator is a pretty easy one. You don't have to do a lot of fact-checking.
And their fact-checking department is pretty slim over at Tucker Carlson tonight.
Let them take a break. You guys take a month off.
I mean, as far as the lawsuit goes, all the food you had to throw away out of your refrigerator, for one, that's going in the lawsuit.
$2,200 that they took and didn't write down. I don't know. This thing just gets more and more, sus as time goes on.
Well, just very carefully read the fucking deal before you sign it. That's all I'm going to say. Because I would sue the fuck out of them. Yeah, the $2,200 they're not going to get back. Yeah, that, dude. That's a lawsuit right there.
Yeah. They also took my jar of Delta 8 and a bunch of empty vape carts, and they never wrote those down either.
You need to bug your own house. Everybody needs to bug their own houses. Not with, like, hidden cameras. That way they can't fucking find them. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because how are you going to prove your case against law enforcement in a court of law, in a civil court? People believe the fucking cops. They don't understand how crooked they are.
The majority of people still do, but I think there's been a real hard turn over the past few years on kind of the public's view of the police. You know, maybe before it was like 90% of people would just go with what a cop would say. And I think now, based on absolutely nothing other than pure speculation, it'd be maybe like 70%, 65 maybe.
They're probably thinking twice before they decide what they're going to do in these civil cases. You know what I mean? They're probably going to think twice about having police up there on the stand being the only witness for the state in a jury trial.
Yeah, and I also think that maybe nowadays, like, they just can't be as brazen. Like, before they could just go up there and say whatever, and now they maybe have to, like, put some thought into it. Like, we have to construct this lie to where it makes a little bit of sense.
They have to premeditate their crimes more efficiently.
Oh, good for them in the long term. You know, they're getting their act together a little bit. They were just getting sloppy there for a few years, and people started calling them out on it, and they'll be running a lot more tight ship as time goes on, I imagine.
I spent all day ripping the brake lines out of my truck. I blew a brake line on my truck. So that's what I've been working on all day.
Dude, fuck working on vehicles. I'm so over that shit.
I can't stand to pay somebody to do something that I can do.
Yes. I can, because I know I can figure this out, whether I know how to do it, and I know how to work on vehicles fairly well. You know, I've been doing it for a while. I try to be really frugal. You know, it's like, well, it's going to fuck up my day because I'm going to sit here and have to mess with this all day. But, you know, how many hundreds, thousands of dollars is it going to save me? But what drives me insane, and this is really just a result of how unorganized I am, looking for stuff all day. Like, okay, now I got to find the big 19 millimeter wrench for the hub bolt. Where the fuck is it? Now I got to spend an hour digging through shit. Like, if I had an actual shop where everything was organized and in the correct drawer, but I would not be as opposed to it. But like, that's what really kills me, is just having to look for stuff, and not being able to get it done because of that.
It's one of the most frustrating parts about it. Well, you just take one day a year and organize your shit, man.
It saved me so much headache. I would save more than that one day's time over the course of a year.
Of course.
I got a buddy. He is a fan of chemicals that make you very attentive to detail and like long, onerous organizing projects. And on occasion, he'll like just randomly stop by and start like organizing, or used to do it. Like, he'd randomly stop by and just organize my garage, or clean out my shed, or like weed eat my yard. So I may just need to get a hold of him, just like pay him, be like, hey man, just go through all my shit, or because he's a master at organizing shit. Just have him do everything.
Just pick up some Ecronite, give him a little bit of meth, and
that's have him. He'll be out there from like 1 a.m. to 10 a.m. and just go to town, buddy.
Sounds an awful lot like Nazis, what the Nazis did. Just give all the troops fucking meth and tell them to blitzkrieg.
I mean, it's effective, you know? It does work. Yeah, I was actually just thinking, like, would that be so bad? If I was a Jew, like in Poland during the Nazi occupation, what drugs would they have to give me that I would be okay with, like, hanging out in a concentration camp? Like, if I was one of the, and I knew I wasn't going to get killed, but I had to live in the concentration camp and just like carry all my homies out of the gas chamber. Would there be a concoction of drugs where I'd be like, yeah, man, just whatever, you know, just keep me loaded, and I'll do all this, you know, dirty work for you. I can see points in my life where I would do that. Like, if you gave me just a bunch of Opanas and cocaine, gave me a female for company maybe once a week or something, like, yeah, versus like having to work at a factory for 10 hours a day, second shift, come home to your shitty apartment, like, oh, I got a cot with 50 other emaciated people, but they give me lots of drugs. I might take that deal. I don't have to worry about food. Like they keep me fed for the most part.
Honestly,
Just
like
saying Jews had it easy. That's all I'm saying.
the concentration camp is like better quality of life than a lot of like meth head dens that I've been to.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
I do.
I mean, they wouldn't be getting hungry. They'd work like crazy.
Yeah.
They should. Yeah, that's a good point. They should have gave the Jews the shit they were giving the troops. They wouldn't have been complaining after the war.
I know it. Imagine how much heartache they would have saved themselves down the road. You know, they're still arresting guys that worked in those concentration camps. Like, I think there was one a few years ago, some guard. You know, if he'd just been calling up his uncle from Akron, hey, buddy, I got to take something into these fellas so they can continue working, you know, they wouldn't be doing that today. That's all I'm saying. You know, the guy's going to die in prison now, and he could have avoided that.
That was Hitler's biggest mistake. Not getting all the Jews high in the concentration camps.
Yeah, that's really the only one I can think of, the only mistake he made.
We do have some current events to get into. Also, we're planning a live show for Sunday this week. For right now, that's still on as far as I know. Looks like all the stars are aligned. I should have the truck put back together. Should be fun, man. I
think so. Yeah.
So 2 big things I wanted to cover real quick here. California banning the sale of gasoline cars. Pretty interesting. It doesn't take effect till 2035, but they are using the authoritarian ban hammer of the liberal government in California. They are banning gasoline engines.
Jesus, I did not hear about that. Is that enforceable? Or is this just like some way to placate a certain demographic of people that like these kind of fatuous, symbolic pieces of legislation?
Well, they banned bacon, the bacon ban.
Oh, yeah, I forgot. They did ban that. And
It
was successful.
I'm sure these car companies are going to sue them, and it'll play out in court. But I don't know. What do you think about this? This is authoritarian, right? This is...
It's definitely oppressive. Yeah, I mean, it's authoritarianism to the max. It is an attack on our freedom, my freedom to spend a large portion of my income every year on petroleum products. And I think that's a freedom that we need to protect for everybody. You know, I, much like you, love having to change the oil in my vehicle, love having to stop at gas stations where you get suckered into buying a bunch of candy bars and shit, Diet Cokes. And, you know, it's a meaningful and valuable component of our American lifestyle to continue to waste money like that. And, you know, this is just typical comrades in California trying to overturn these traditional American values.
They're destroying the American dream. The open road, man. The hot rod. Ruining the country.
You know, this reminds me of what Bush said after 9/11. They hate our freedom. And if this isn't a prima facie evidence of that, I don't know what is.
It's like guns. They're so cool.
They really are cool.
The gasoline cars are really cool, man. Other thing, Biden canceling student debt announced today. Canceling 10,000, an additional 10,000 canceled for Pell Grant recipients. This comes about 3 years after we paid our student debts off, so it hurts a little bit. It stings. Not much I can do about it. Let's go, Brandon.
Let's go, Brandon. There was an exchange between a cuckle indeed, couple cucks, a couple of Congress people.
Coin that one. That one works.
It does. It was some conservative congressperson that kind of brought up that point. That, you know, what about people like me or you or anybody else that actually did pay off their student loans? How do they deal with the unfairness of this bill? And I want to say it was maybe Nina Turner. Is that right? I might be wrong about that. Said that she would be happy if he proposed a bill to pay us back for the money that we had to pay out. And in which case I'd be happy with that. Yeah, but reimburse people like us that did have to pay them.
Well, the cutoff should be right when we paid ours off, though. Nobody before us should get paid.
That's the most sensible way to do it.
Yeah.
So actually, I was like just reading about that, I don't know, a couple hours ago, and my gut reaction was, in our divorce, my wife had used me as a co-sponsor or whatever for her to get a student loan when she was going to school. And she was able to use that as leverage to get some of the equity out of my house. And so now, like, I really want her to have to pay that money because I didn't want her to be able to take that debt on to get money from me and then her not have to pay that. So
his literature.
Right.
Yeah, so in order to stop the agenda, we need to get rid of the big banks.
This is hilarious. I remember this.
Karl Marx, no one knew who he was until the big banks distributed all of his literature.
Right.
Yeah, so in order to get rid of communism, we need to get rid of the big banks.
Yeah.
Get rid of big pharma.
Right.
What else? Big tech.
Right.
And it's like
land like these like landlords that like are coming in and buying like hundreds of properties. You don't even know what corporation.
Like China is doing it, and Bill Gates.
Zillow.
Yeah.
I feel like a lot of people here are very fed up and they're ready to collectivize and sort of seize the means of production.
Right.
This is brilliant. This is brilliant, dude.
Gotta appreciate a good troll.
It's funny. I work for actually not this shirt, the other shirt I had on earlier, for a company not too far from here called Liberty Pump, non-union. They let the owners of the company sold a third of the company to the employees. So the employees have ownership of it, which is a lot better. And
Well, they're collectivizing.
right,
Cooperative.
it's an ESOP.
Yeah,
You know what's funny about this?
What's that?
You know who Darren Brown, the magician, is? So he does this sort of shit where he tricks people like this, but his whole strategy is to do this to like 100,000 people and use the one that he wants to use to make his show, to make his point, to do his magic or whatever. So that's how he does most of his tricks. But I feel like that's not what happened here. Like, this is just the first guy he came across. This would work on any fucking MAGA chode. Any of them. They're all this dumb.
This is my experience to a T when it comes to talking, especially like the real, I guess like the dyed in the wool, the real hard right wingers that I speak with. If you talk to them about issues and don't use any of the buzzwords that scare them, like they'll generally agree with you about a lot of, I guess, left wing. Like, I have talked to hardcore MAGA people, like my brother-in-law, who just absolutely thinks Donald Trump's the bee's knees. Yeah, if you're careful in the language you use, you're very specific about just the issues and not talking about characters or culture war issues. Like, he's basically a Bernie bro. He just doesn't know it.
Well, that's how the Trump movement tricked all these white working class people into voting for fucking the Republican Party. That's exactly how they did it.
I don't know. It seems like, I don't know. Is this give you hope, or is this disconcerting? Does this give you hope that, like, fundamentally the solutions to certain issues, there's a lot of overlap between what how you or I would maybe approach it, and how people that are strong right-wingers would also like to see things handled? Or is it disconcerting in that no matter, like, they're going to vote against it no matter how much we can make the argument, because we can make an argument that's obviously salient and obviously appeals to them, but despite all that, because of the tribalism and like the cultural narrative, they are going to vote against their interest.
We're going to talk a little bit about this later in a segment I have planned, but I don't have any hope. Let me put it that way, first of all. Because the reason, the things that he's talking about in this video, things that we care about, like workers' rights, redistributive policies, he doesn't care about. That's not what these people are voting on. That's not the issues they care about. They care about immigrants and the fucking border. They care about bashing gay people. Those are the issues they're voting on. They're not voting on economic policy issues.
Yeah, fair enough. That is a big part of it. I definitely agree.
So you wanted to talk about Salmon Rushdie this week. I don't know anything about this guy, really. I haven't read his books. I know he's pretty well liked in the literature sort of circles, but other than that, I'm completely ignorant to his work. I just know he wrote the Satanic Verses, so I assumed it was like some sort of goth book for like high school kids, but could be wrong about that.
Yeah, that's what it is. It was written exclusively for children that shop at Hot Topic. He wrote it while wearing JNCOs.
Yeah, of course. He wrote it with a feather quill.
Yeah, and like one of those little silver fake nails that kind of like wraps around your pinky. You know what I'm talking about? Yeah. So, anyways, Salmon Rushdie back in the news recently. Probably not for something that he would have liked. It was, I guess, 2 weeks ago, a week and a half ago now. Rushdie went to the Chautauqua, New York. It's like a literary festival that they have in Chautauqua, New York, to give a lecture to a group of visitors and festival goers with Ralph Henry Reese. He's this guy that runs this organization that provides sanctuary to writers under threat of political persecution. At the festival, he was attacked on stage and repeatedly stabbed by a young man, Hadi Matar. Normally in the U.S., a single simple stabbing victim, victim stabbing isn't much to talk about and wouldn't normally make the news. However, Rushdie has an interesting history with being under threat of attack, and he's kind of been a nexus for the discussion about the U.S.'s clash with, I guess you'd call it Islamism, for like 40 years now. So we'll just briefly go over Matar, the attacker. He's not terribly interesting, and then we'll go into Rushdie a little bit.
Stabbed him in the face. He messed him up.
Yeah, he stabbed him, I don't know, it was like 8-9 times. One in the eyeball. Like, apparently Rushdie's going to lose an eye. He stabbed him in the liver, chest, arm, shoulder. And he's like a 72-year-old man, so...
Yeah, but he should still know how to do a double leg. I mean, come on. What the fuck?
Yeah. Rushdie?
Yeah.
I would think so. I would think you would have learned. I would think, well, after what he dealt with like 40 years ago, you would, maybe, or 30 years ago, I guess, you'd put a little bit into
self. A couple classes, yeah.
Take a Taibo class, something, buddy. Jesus.
Yeah, watch a Steven Seagal movie. Just disarm the opponent.
I don't know. He's been, apparently Rushdie, like his wife is like a supermodel, so he's like, I guess he got a lot of money and fame, and he just goes around banging like dime piece broads all the time. So I can respect that. You didn't have a time. You had some hot dates to meet up with, but so anyways, Mr. Matar, his role is not terribly interesting in this whole thing. He's this 24-year-old man who was living in New Jersey, American-born. In 2018, he traveled to Lebanon for 3 weeks. When he come back, I guess he seemed a lot more moody and withdrawn. But I guess he went there to get in touch with his ancestral roots. I imagine this be the same thing. Like if I went to Italy, I come back talking like I was from out of the cast of The Sopranos, calling everyone a Marone. It really seemed like Matar was kind of like an incel. He didn't seem, when he perpetrated the attack, he accredited it to the Iranian Defense Force, who have claimed Rushdie as an enemy for some time. It doesn't seem like he actually had any connection with them. He just seems kind of like an incel that was looking for community and wanted to attack this guy to get some notoriety.
Or he was mad that Rushdie was banging such a hot broad and he can't fucking get laid at all. It's payback.
That might be it. Yeah. This whole thing, I guess the incel part, it just kind of goes double for that. So anyways, a little bit about Rushdie. So Rushdie is this acclaimed Indian-British author. He's been publishing for decades. He first rose to international acclaim with his 1981 novel, Midnight's Children. He's wrote a bunch. Anyways, his fourth novel that he wrote in 1989 was The Satanic Verses, and that brought him some hate. Incidentally, so I've never read a full book of his, but I've read like large parts of a couple of his books. They're written in like this older style that's a lot more reminiscent of like Oscar Wilde or Hemingway, in which I mean that there's no superheroes or sword fights, so they're like pretty dull.
I was going to ask what genre of fantasy this was, but I guess it's just...
Yeah, no elves, no Battle of Pelennor Fields. Anyways, so the book Satanic Verses, it's kind of this magical tale of these two immigrants that escape death on their way to Britain. One takes on the shape of an angel, the other takes on the shape of the devil. From what I understand, it's supposed to be an allegory for the immigrant experience with undertones of dealing with mental illness. I don't know, whatever. It's boring as shit. Though his writing is top-notch and his use of language is pretty fantastic. So it is fun to read if you like reading boring shit.
Nerd alert.
So in 1988, Rushdie was living in Britain when the Satanic Verses were released. Throughout the book, there are these recurring dream sequences from one of the protagonists. In one of these dreams, there is a character named Mahound, who is Muhammad. So Mahound apparently was an old English, it was like a name that the British colonizers used for Muhammad that was like meant to be degrading. But so there's a character named Mahound who is supposed to be Muhammad. So what are the Satanic Verses? So this part is actually pulled from a really interesting part of early Islamic history. So of course, at the time of Muhammad, the area in which he lived was polytheistic, as were many of the other neighboring lands. Just like the Bible we have today, the Quran underwent several changes over the years, and unlike the Bible, many can be linked directly to the Prophet because there's such a kind of direct lineage of schools of thought and scholars to the prophet. So the story that is referenced is not in the modern Quran, but was in an earlier recited version. Either way, the story itself comes from a number of early Islamic biographers. So the story of the actual, this is the real satanic verses, not the book that Rushdie wrote. Story goes that as Muhammad was traveling around the Arabian Peninsula, trying to rally support for his cause and his new religion, he traveled to the wealthy city of Mecca. Muhammad, trying to sway the people of Mecca, was not able to do so because he knew his religion would not accept the three polytheistic gods of their city. Since Muhammad wasn't able to get support by denying their gods in his recitation, which was essentially him giving a live in-person recitation of what God was directly telling him. So he was in Mecca. This is what he would do. He would go to these places and he would channel what God was telling him at that particular point in time.
Sure he would.
Yeah, obviously. That's definitely not made up. But anyway, so he couldn't get the people of Mecca on board with him denying their gods, so he come back. He did another recitation in which he accepts the three polytheistic gods of their city. This is how he's able to get Mecca on board. Of course, he ends up
He was bullshitting them.
He was bullshitting them. He told him the story. He told him the story that he wanted to tell. That didn't work for him. He told him the story that they wanted to hear, so he could get them on board for his conquering. And then later on in his life, somebody asked him, hey, if Allah is the one true God, how are these other three gods fit into this story? And apparently what Muhammad told them was that must have been Satan whispering to him at that point in time and not God. And so that's where the idea of these satanic verses comes in. Yeah, it's an interesting little part of history. So anyways, Rushdie kind of uses the idea. It's not even a main point of the story, but he uses this idea as a device in literature to kind of explore it. And a lot of people got upset about it.
That he brought it up? That he mentioned it? Is it
yes.
Banished from the history of Islam?
So the story itself has, I guess it's kind of controversial in Islam today. There's different schools of thought about whether or not it's a true story. There's a lot of early Islamic scholars that will accept that it happened, quote unquote happened. And there's a lot that aren't, but I think the association with Muhammad having recited something that Satan told him is just so inflammatory to them that, it's especially for an outsider, for a non-Muslim to talk about it, it was a bit too much for him. Okay, so yeah, though it's not in the modern Quran, this is a well-known and generally accepted part of Islamic traditions. So the book itself, it deals with a similar character making the pronouncement that his followers must adopt these three old polytheistic deities, but later renounces them for the same reason as the actual Muhammad. There's another sequence in the book about a group of people in India enticed to take a foot pilgrimage to Mecca. The fanatics state that they'll walk across the Arabian Sea. Spoiler alert, it doesn't turn out well for them. They can't actually walk on water. And then there's a last sequence, a dream sequence in the book that introduces a character called the Imam, who is essentially like a caricature of Khomeini. In each part of the book, it deals with and represents Muslims as fanatics, I guess. Not all Muslims at fanatics, but the ones in the story, it represents kind of in a fanatical way. And they were so upset about this that they started rioting and burning places all across to prove that they weren't fanatics.
Really? There was riots over this book?
Oh, there was murders. Places burnt down. Yeah, it was kind of a big deal.
Fucking babies, dude.
Yeah, so to show the world that fanaticism isn't deeply rooted in Islam, much of the entire Islamic world rose up in outrage. So this is when the book banning started. Of course, it initially only started in countries that were really deeply rooted in Islam. So Pakistan, Iran, obviously. Then the Ayatollah Khomeini, at the time the theocratic leader of Iran, he goes on state television to pronounce a fatwa against Rushdie, which is a fatwa being a death sentence, and making it incumbent upon all Shiite Muslims to carry out or aid in carrying out the murder of Salman Rushdie.
Ayatollah Khamenei said the death sentence was still valid and must be carried out. Mr. Rushdie, he said, had committed blasphemy. He would have to be executed. The power of Ayatollah Khomeini's religious and political legacy was demonstrated at his funeral last summer. Faced by that and with the demands of Iran's unbending senior clerics, the country's new leadership has to show it remains loyal to his memory. The anniversary of the Islamic Revolution, which brought Khomeini to power, is this weekend. It's no coincidence that his successor as spiritual leader chose today to remind his people of the legacy Khomeini left Mr. Rushdie.
It's not really blasphemy if Rushdie's not like a devout Muslim.
Yeah, so he came from a Muslim family, so it would have also been apostasy.
Yeah, but I'm sure he's not like a devout believer.
He was not. He was come from a liberal Muslim family, then he become an atheist, I guess, pretty early on in his life, which made it that much worse, I guess, because apostasy is one of the biggest sins in Islam.
If God is all powerful, do you think he really cares about like some shitty book some asshole wrote? I doubt it.
Apparently so. Apparently that's one of his number one concerns. But, who am I to say so? So, yeah, Rushdie at the time, he had to go into hiding with round-the-clock armed guards, much to the consternation of the British establishment. It was a recurring theme in the West amongst everybody in power that they might give token siding with Rushdie on the ideal of adherence to the principles of free speech, but a lot of people seem to be really upset with him that he would piss off the Muslim world, which he certainly did. But a lot of people felt like that was a lot more, that his writing the book and pissing them off was a lot more serious of a crime than their being upset at the book and the kind of the threats and public displays of violence that were rampant worldwide at the time. So they had there was several publishing houses in different countries around the world that released the book that were attacked. Two of the individuals responsible for translating it were attacked. One of them killed. I believe that was the Japanese translator that was actually killed, stabbed, actually, just like Rushdie was stabbed on stage. Yeah, so this brings, I guess, to the interesting part of the whole Rushdie affair was what I was talking about just a second ago, was the response by Western governments and liberal commentators in the West to the whole incident, saying there was kind of a general sense that while Rushdie had maybe the right to do it, it would have been wrong for him to do it because he knew that it would be inflammatory, and I guess you're literally attacking something that was so sacred and meaningful to a large population of people, and that it was just stupid, inflammatory, and that maybe he got what he deserved to a certain degree.
I guess the thing that pissed him off was portraying Muslims as fanatical. That's what actually irritated him, or was it just talking about the satanic verses, which are not supposed to be talked about in polite company or whatever?
Well, yeah. So there are certain sects of Muslims that, I guess the Shiite Muslims is the ones I'm talking about in particular, that view the idea of the satanic verses as an infidel lie, like a plot by the Western colonizers to discredit, to slander the Prophet Muhammad for their own purposes. And so, yeah, it's very inflammatory from their perspective to even bring it up because they feel it's a lie. Like I say, though, that's Shiite Muslims. There are a lot of other Muslim sects that accept it and just say, this is just part of our history. And, I guess they would relate the idea of Muhammad having conversation with Satan in much the same way that in Christian mythology, Jesus, goes out into the desert with Satan for 40 days and 40 nights and has his temptation. So anyways, bad parts of this. This is kind of where the Western commitment to the free exchange of ideals was usurped by fear of violence and by fear of being called a bigot. Protesters in Pakistan attacked the American Cultural Center, which had nothing to do with Rushdie. The Commission for Racial Equality held seminars on the Rushdie affair where they invited Muslim academics that promoted the idea of a negotiated compromise that would protect Muslim sensibilities against gratuitous provocation. The Union of Islamic Students Association of Europe, which was the largest collective of Islamic students in Europe, issued a statement offering to commit murder for Khomeini. You had people like George Sabah, who is the director of the Near East Studies Center at UCLA, who told an interviewer that Khomeini was completely within his rights to call for Rushdie's death. Had playwright Arthur Miller. He was the victim of the Red Scare trials under McCarthy in the 50s, also known for dicking down Marilyn Monroe. You had these groups of left-wing intellectuals, people like Arthur Miller. Hitchens talked about these people they would be very quick if it were some South American dictatorship that was cracking down on free speech and journalism to rally support for them and to speak out on their behalf. And when it come to speaking out against this particular attack and speaking out in favor of Rushdie, they either wouldn't do it or would just outright say that they were scared to do it.
Well, there's also the revolution was just a few years earlier. I wonder if there was more context that we're not really aware of because, I mean, it's 4 decades later. I wonder if Rushdie wrote this following the revolution as like a fuck you to Khomeini or something to that effect, or it was interpreted that way, you know what I mean, in the left.
Well, he definitely had the character of the imam in there that was pretty directly, like I said, I can't say it because there's probably a lot of context that, I'm missing out on of what was going on in the news at that time. But from what I'm reading, the character of the imam was supposed to be this caricature of Imam Khomeini, and it was supposed to be incendiary towards him.
Interesting.
It doesn't seem like the character, even the character of Mahound, it doesn't seem like it's meant to be intentionally incendiary towards anybody. Like I mentioned, it's the story also touches on mental illness. So it is a schizophrenic person that is having these dreams. So I don't know. Not that it matters. He should be able to do it anyways.
Sure. But just context is important. If he's going after Khomeini, it's kind of like going after George Washington, 5 years after the American Revolution. It's going to piss off some people.
Well, he definitely did. Did. But yeah, so if you want to play the last clip down there, this is my boy.
Seems like everybody's being really supportive of Rushdie now after this attack.
Yeah, I think it got thrown in a lot of people's faces, the bad takes that they had on the Rushdie affair back in the 80s. I know just recently in 2020, Rushdie, Chomsky, J.K. Rowling, there's a bunch of other actual left-wing people, authors, had all got together and wrote or signed on to this essay in support of journalistic freedom across the country. I don't know what it was in reference to, but
it was in reference to the cancel culture, basically. I remember that.
Okay.
J.K. Rowling has faced a lot of oppression.
I just wonder what Chomsky thinks about having to sign on with the author of a book about witches and wizards. If we ever get on here, we'll do it.
There's a mistake at the heart of what you say that though you are for free speech, you aren't for the exercise of free speech if it offends Muslims, and you say that that is the line that we draw. As a matter of fact, you're in error. First Amendment to the Constitution allows anyone who wants to insult anyone they like, in any way they choose. That includes belief in religion, which is especially given no particular protection by that amendment, which is in fact rightly described as the cornerstone of our liberty. Now, that's just the fact of the matter. I can say what I like about your religion, and you can say what you like about my humanism, and I will not attempt to prevent you from doing that. In fact, so far from that, I would defend anyone who tried to make you be silent. That is the foundation of what we call the Enlightenment. It's terrible to have to be saying this, because it's ABC, but there it is. Now, to your point about the insult, I have read the book, I don't know if you have, and I'm clear in my mind that no insult to the Prophet or to those who believe in the God of whom he's the messenger is intended. The words that are complained of are spoken by a sick man suffering from paranoid schizophrenia in a dream in which he believes himself to be the Archangel Gabriel, who is a Christian icon. So I think that's about as far fictionally as you could go to avoid the charge of blasphemy. But I must add that if Salman Rushdie had wished to be blasphemous, had wished to challenge the tenets of your faith, that would also be his right. So don't confuse me in giving you two answers. I mean them to be separate but related.
So yeah, during this, it was a lot of people on the left, for whatever reason, at the time seemed to have, I think, what people in retrospect would say was the wrong take. And there seemed to be quite a few people on the right that I would say had the right take. Now, obviously Hitchens at the time, however he ended up, back then he would still openly refer to himself as a socialist. I would imagine he'd definitely be on the left back then, but you had statements from him in support of, unequivocally in support of Rushdie. President Bush, the elder, he actually made a really poignant statement, kind of unequivocally in support of Rushdie and free speech at the time. And then you had people like Chomsky at the time that he didn't. I read as much as I could find that Chomsky had published in reference to the matter, And it's just not that much. He only brings it up in a compendium that he wrote to manufacturing consent as saying that, like, what happened with the Rushdie affair wasn't that big a deal, that the real censorship was what was happening to his book, where he was kind of relating it more to the idea of manufacturing consent and the kind of quiet censorship as being the real problem, not the loud, overt censorship. And it is important to say, like, it didn't work. You know, his book wasn't censored. The book was doing well before that. And then, you know, as one would expect, after this all started happening, his book just become like an insane international bestseller. You know, it's just flying off the shelves all everywhere. So
it's like one of the most famous authors of all time at this point.
Yeah. And it's because of this, like, undoubtedly, you know, he's a good writer. He would have had, I'm sure either way, would have had a lot of respect in the literary community.
Did he plan this? Did he plan this whole thing out, you think?
That's what I'm getting at. You know, I had a workers' comp claim where I got a little bit of money for my knee, and I might make that trade again, you know? So now you get international love and fame and millions of dollars, and you get stabbed in the eye. I might take that deal, James. I might take that deal.
He's going to have so many flowers in his hospital room. So much love.
Plus, some supermodel blowing him while he's laying there getting a morphine drip. Fuck, dude.
Can't beat that.
Jesus. No, you can't. So, yeah, Rushdie, it was all set up. That's the point of this whole thing.
Yeah, this was 1988 clickbait. He was way ahead of the game.
Exactly. Rushdie on top of shit back in the 80s. Yeah. So, I don't know. It's an interesting addendum to to a story that's been going on for a long time.
I feel like Hitchens has written way worse shit than Rushdie about the Islamic faith. He's never got a fatwa put on him.
Yeah, there's certainly. Well, I think he has. He just hasn't had a fatwa put on him by a figure that had as much reach as the Ayatollah Khomeini. So,
well, I think he's just too smooth.
And yeah, back to your point, like, anybody can do a fatwa. Just you might not be listened to if you do it, James. Is I guess what I'm getting at. Like I said, during the original fatwa, he had a bounty. I think at the time it was like $2 million that was put on his head that was supposed to be backed up by the Iranian Revolutionary Guard, or they were the ones offering it. So it was the actual Iranian state. They were reached out to recently, right after this, to ask if that was still on his head. And in response to the recent attack Rushdie suffered, the Iranian Foreign Ministry spokesman Nasir Kanani said, "We do not consider anyone other than Rushdie and his supporters worthy of blame and even condemnation." So they're still sticking with the line.
They didn't make a definitive statement on the money, though.
Yeah, but we're not going to give up on we're not going to pay out. Well, I mean, I guess he didn't kill him, so you don't get the reward if you don't actually kill him, right? Because the fatwa was for his death,
right? But they didn't confirm that the money is still available. They're just implying that it is, so they can get the fatwa accomplished.
Are you saying the Iranian National Guard isn't to be trusted? I don't know about that.
I trust all religious fundamentalists. I think they're great. It's pretty crazy that people still believe this stuff. I don't want to get into this again. This always baffles me, dude. You can Google this shit, right?
Yeah.
Is God real, Google? Let me ask.
I wonder what Google says. The first result answers in fucking Genesis. That's the Creationist Institute that is run out of Kentucky, actually. So they're the ones that made the big ark up there right outside Cincinnati. Have you seen that?
The ark? There's an ark?
The ark. Yeah, your tax dollars paid for it, buddy. Too, like by the way.
A boat or
like a boat? It's not an actual boat. It's an amusement park that was built. It's a creationist amusement park where they built this giant fucking boat that looks like Noah's Ark, because that's what it's supposed to be. And you go in there and you learn about how Noah during the flood put 2 animals of each kind on there, and the dinosaurs were too big, so he left them off the boat, and God gets mad when you play with your wiener, all that type of shit. And it was I want to say it was built like 10, 15 years ago. And it was a bit of a scandal at the time because they got, I forget, it was like $10, $20 million in state grant money to build it because it was supposed to promote tourism. It didn't promote, nobody goes to the fucking thing.
I would go to it.
I think most of the people that go to it are atheists that go there to clown on it.
Yeah.
So I've seen so many videos of that type of thing, like prominent atheists going there and just fucking messing with the teenagers that are like supposed to run it. Like, it's
like
like trying to get in debates with these fucking kids that are just there as like a job. Like, come on, man, leave me alone. But maybe we'll have to do that field trip sometime. Go to the Ark Museum.
You ever seen what the angels are supposed to look like? Like, I just learned this. There's descriptions of them apparently in the Bible, and they're fucking crazy.
Yeah, it's like a trip. They're real trippy.
Yeah, like 20-eyed monsters and shit.
Yeah, they have wheels on wheels and 9 heads each with 9 eyes per head, or all sorts of craziness like that. They're not really pretty. I think they can take on a pretty form, but their true forms are pretty monstrous. Because I know, like, the story of Lot. I was actually talking about this with my daughter just the other day. Lot was the one godly man that lived in Sodom, and he was visited by 2 angels, and apparently they were pretty hot, and all the townspeople wanted to fuck them. And Lot, being a good guy, he threw his daughters out there for the townspeople to rape, because he's a good guy, and he didn't want them to be angel fuckers.
Jesus Christ.
Yeah. So they can be hot. I don't know how hot they actually are.
I just assumed they all looked like John Travolta or whatever, you know.
Yeah. Ben Affleck and Matt Damon from Dogma.
While we're talking about dumb shit, have you seen the new Game of Thrones yet?
Yes. Me and my girlfriend watched it last night.
I was very tepid going in. I was not expecting much. And I was very pleasantly surprised. I've watched one episode. I don't know how much is out.
Just the one.
Yeah. It was fucking sick, dude. I loved it.
Yeah, we'll see. I don't know, man. It's so hard for me to get my hopes up.
Pilots are always good, though. Pilots of every shows are good.
Yeah, exactly. They put everything into it. Like, it has to be good. That's how they're selling the shows, the pilot, right?
That's pretty fucking sick. The special effects, what I am optimistic about, they didn't spend a lot of time on the effects. The effects look like shit, but it doesn't matter because the acting is fucking incredible and the writing is really good, too. And the directing is good. So, you know, I give a shit less about the CG. It looks like I could have done it on my fucking computer.
Yeah, my early sense of it is everything is good. It's really good. I don't think that the dialogue rises to the level of the dialogue from like seasons 2, 3, and 4 of Game of Thrones yet. Obviously, we're just one episode in. Like, I haven't heard any Tywin Lannister level dialogue yet. And I hope that we get there. I hope that they have that, because that was, I think, one of the best parts of the show. It really made the show. Like, the conversations, the early conversations between Varys and Tyrion, for example, or Varys.
Yeah, Tyrion
Varys
was
and
so
Littlefinger.
good. Jaime was so good. All the Lannisters were awesome, man. You're right.
The scene in the bathhouse with Jaime and Brienne where he confesses that, you know, he actually saved the whole city. I think it was like season 3 or something, like right after he had his hand cut off. And the dialogue is just so damn good. The acting was so damn good.
I don't think we'll get there, but I don't know. The brother, there seems like some good dynamics going on. The king, the king's brother, it all seems pretty good so far, man. The daughter, everybody seems really good.
Have you read any of the background, like the literature?
I've read the original books. That's it. I haven't read any extended universe shit. No.
Yeah, so it's really interesting too. I think I have a sense of where things are going, and I'm not going to spoiler alert anything, but it's really interesting to read how George did the backstory, like the World of Ice and Fire, and I think Fire and Blood was the other one that kind of covers this subject matter. But he wrote it as a history book written by a maester that was compiling the story from these multiple different sources. Yeah. The backstory that we have doesn't actually tell you what was going on. It tells you the stories of these different people and their interpretation of what was going on.
That's what's so brilliant about the show, because every time, like with the original books, it was the same way with the original show. You get the point of view from the Lannisters, and then you get the point of view from everybody else. In the books, there's way more to it, obviously, and the politics is what's really good about the series, and supposedly that's what they're going to focus on with this series.
Yeah, I hope so.
Now, the end of the first episode, they're name dropping all of the other people that we already like, their relatives and shit. Oh, so sick.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was weird though. I don't know if did you ever watch? You probably never watched Doctor Who.
No, God, no.
Okay.
8 million episodes to catch up on.
Doctor Who is great because you can just kind of pick a doctor and just watch those, and they kind of exist as their own thing. So I had watched, I think he was the 10th Doctor. So Matt Smith, the guy who plays Daemon Targaryen, he played the 10th Doctor. And I think he was like for 2 or 3 seasons. And so I just kind of watched them in isolation. And it's fun. It's kind of one of those episodic little shows where you could just kind of watch it at your leisure. You don't really have to keep up with it, so to speak. But, it's really kind of kid-friendly and whimsical. Like, that's who I see Matt Smith as is in my head. The doctor, friend to children, all that. And then you see him just like fucking this whore from behind and killing people. And it was like extra jarring for me to see him in that space, I guess.
Yeah, he's like a cop almost in the original, where he kills out all the fucking vagabonds in the city. Brutal, man.
Yeah, I don't know what that was about. I do have a feeling that he's going to turn out to be, he is like a good guy, though.
No way. He's the villain.
No. He's definitely not. And this is not spoiler because I don't know this, but the conversation that he was having with his brother Viserys, the king, at the end, where he was calling his brother weak. Viserys is fucking weak, I think, and I think that Daemon, he is doing what he thinks is the best way to go about dealing with these issues, and he really is on the side of his brother. He's also just a bit of a wild child, I guess, like kind of in addition to being somebody that really does care about peace and stability. He's just trying to do it his own way.
Maybe. It could go either way. I don't know.
And that Hightower girl, I got my eye on her because she's just another Marjorie Tyrell.
Maybe.
Yeah. Got my eye on you.
The whole thing about Game of Thrones, nobody's the villain. They're all fucking terrible, typically. Like, that's how Martin wrote the characters. They're all shitty. Yeah. I'm interested to see who's going to be the relative of Daenerys, obviously. I'm assuming it's Daemon at this point, but I don't know. We need to move on here. I do have a segment. This is sort of an ongoing segment on the show, the whole cancel culture and media censorship. It's sort of a big issue, but there is some research into this stuff. We've also differed on this particular topic, what we think should happen, how this should be handled by society. I think media is very important. I think it's, in the West especially, we criticize countries like China for the way they treat their media, but there are some benefits to having a state media. That's why every country basically has a state media except for the United States. The United Kingdom is trying to get rid of the BBC the Tories have been trying to get rid of them for decades, man.
I was actually going to bring up the BBC as kind of my example of a state media that I would really like to see implemented. Like, I think the BBC just does absolutely fantastic work.
I think they're way too conservative. They're extremely pro-capitalist for a state media. But obviously, when you compare it to the United States, though, it blows them out of the fucking water.
Well, I guess, yeah, that is a comparative evaluation to U.S. media.
Yeah. But so there are a couple of studies I wanted to mention briefly that shed some light on sort of what we know scientifically about this stuff. The first one here is a fairly recent one, January 2020 study. I'm just going to read the abstract. How effective is fact-checking and countervailing alternative facts? So after 2016, the election where Trump basically used Cambridge Analytica to buy the election via Facebook ads, these companies have slowly started implementing these fact checks. We have companies like PolitiFact now that sort of do this as a business, as an industry. How effective is fact-checking in countervailing, quote, alternative facts, i.e. misleading statements by politicians? In a randomized online experiment during the 2017 French presidential election campaign, we subjected subgroups of 2,480 French voters to alternative facts by the extreme right candidate Marine Le Pen and or corresponding facts about the European refugee crisis from official sources. We find that 1. Alternative facts are highly persuasive. 2. Fact-checking improves factual knowledge of voters. 3. But it does not affect policy conclusions or support for the candidate. 4. Exposure to facts alone does not decrease support for the candidate, even though voters update their knowledge. We find evidence consistent with the view that at least part of the effect can be explained by raising salience of the immigration issue. So, in other words, people don't care about the facts. This is what we were talking about earlier. They have a belief, and they look for facts to verify their pre-existing belief. They don't, and when they're presented with the real facts, they'll change their knowledge. They now know the truth, but they don't fucking care. They vote Marine Le Pen anyway because they hate fucking immigrants. They're racists, basically, is what this study's saying.
Yeah, that seems to be kind of to coincide with, or to line up pretty well with certainly my experiences with talking to people. It's really hard, no matter how many facts and studies that you can present or how many times you can show that the people that they're listening to are misrepresenting things. It's really difficult to actually get people to admit that they were wrong or that they were lied to.
You know, immigrants commit more crimes than American citizens, Tony.
Yeah, that's what I've heard. And, you know, when you show them that on the whole that they commit fewer crimes, that they're a lot more law abiding, and then you can give salient arguments as to why they would want to be more law abiding because they're wanting to stay here. Yeah, none of that seems to matter, or those facts are dismissed as just being another opinion. I think that's kind of what I see.
What I run up against is your sources are wrong because they're controlled by Klaus Schwab or whatever Jewish person you want to name.
Yeah. So I come up against that a lot. I'll be arguing with somebody that's listening to Tucker Carlson, and then I'll say, oh, well, let's just look up the Immigration Naturalization Service, what their numbers are on arrest or whatever for talking, like, say, immigration. And yeah, well, those are the government numbers, and Biden's in control of the government. Well, we can find the numbers from when Trump was in the government. Well, that's all deep state run by the. Okay, well, where's Tucker getting his numbers? Like, what's he citing? Because he's not citing any numbers usually, or he'll be citing INS numbers kind of out of context. He'll give a big number about the number of immigrants arrested this year, the number of, there was 50,000 illegal immigrants that come over in Texas this year, trying to scare people. And then you can point out that, the past 3 years it was 60,000. So it's actually down this year, but they're not interested in those numbers. They're just interested in the one number that was picked and given out of context that proves the point that they already are primed to believe.
Yeah, there's a specific example that reminds me of that I just heard not too long ago. He was talking about this exact issue, and he said he'll say something like, well, we know, he'll always say this, we know that immigrants commit more crimes than American citizens, and then he cites a statistic from one city in one state. That's his citation. And his audience believes it. They believe the first thing he said because of the second statistic, which doesn't prove the first thing he said, because they're not smart enough to figure that out or to parse that, or they don't understand statistics, or
it's the inability to evaluate evidence, to know how to read statistics, know how to read a graph, know how to process numbers, and realize like a number given out of context is meaningless because you have to see the trend, because that's what he's talking about is the trend. If things go up, you have to show that they're going up, but they're not showing that it's going up. They're just giving a number and leading you to believe that, well, the numbers prior were lower.
Well, he's telling them what they want to hear, what they already believe, and then he's giving them some scrap of evidence that he's conjured out of thin air to back that up with. Well,
it does make his job easier. I imagine the job of a right-wing commentator is a pretty easy one. You don't have to do a lot of fact-checking.
Yeah, their fact-checking department is pretty slim over at Tucker Carlson tonight.
Let them take a break. You guys take a month off. You're not getting paid for it.
So what's the solution here? What's the solution besides what I want to do is ban lying I want to put these people in fucking jail for lying to the public, these public figures. That's what I want to do. But what's the non-coercive, non-authoritarian solution here? Because what the Democrats have basically done is, very little. They have Occupy Democrats, which is supposed to be their answer to right-wing bullshit, which is like a DNC social media org that once in a while will have some vaguely not true shit, but it's, for the most part, it's factual. But it's inflammatory. It's supposed to be inflammatory the way the right is inflammatory. Doesn't go to that extreme, obviously, but that's their solution. It's fucking garbage.
Yeah.
What's the solution? What do you do about people like Tucker Carlson lying to the American public on his quote-unquote news show?
Realistically, I don't know. I don't know what can be done.
Yeah.
If I were in control of the government for 30 years, I think it would just be education. Like, hands down, it has to start with education. I think you could take out, I'm trying to think of what class I could take out to put in critical thinking. Like, that's to Carl Sagan's Demon Haunted World should be required reading in every school across the country. It's a great little book where he talks about logic, critical thinking. He gives all these great anecdotes, little stories about how you evaluate knowledge, and everyone should read it. I don't know. You probably cut out algebra.
It hurts.
Probably cut out foreign language. Like, realistically.
Yeah.
our language is the best. Nobody gives a shit about Spanish. So just cut foreign language requirements, put Carl Sagan in there.
We can get rid of French. French is terrible. Even in France, they should get rid of it, to be honest. It sounds like shit.
Realistically, yeah.
Can't even understand what they're saying, dude.
And just their culture offends me.
Yeah.
And it's I feel like just the whole French attitude, libertine.
They're all Harvey Weinstein, and they're okay with it.
Thank you. Yes, that's it. That's pretty much, you nailed it.
So here's the other study I had to inform our listeners here. This is from 2016. This came on the heels of the 2016 election that we were discussing earlier, Cambridge Analytica and all that shit. This one's called Less Than You Think, Prevalence and Predictors of Fake News Dissemination on Facebook. Abstract. So-called fake news has renewed concerns about the prevalence and effects of misinformation in political campaigns. Given the potential for widespread dissemination of this material, we examined the individual level characteristics associated with sharing false articles during the 2016 U.S. presidential campaign. To do so, we uniquely link an original survey with respondents' sharing activity as recorded in Facebook profile data. Conservatives were more likely to share articles from fake news domains, which in 2016 were largely pro-Trump in orientation, than liberals or moderates. We also find a strong age effect, which persists after controlling for partisanship and ideology. On average, users over 65 shared nearly 7 times as many articles from fake news domains as the youngest age group. Again, this is after controls for partisanship and ideology. So in summary here, conservatives are more likely to share fake news articles, or articles from fake news domains is how the study has it laid out. Not surprising. And old people share fake news fucking constantly.
It is unsurprising. I think a lot of it has to do with older generations not being savvy to how algorithms work. I know this is a conversation I've had with people. They're used to the idea of the nightly news and having somebody go through it and kind of process and really break down the news that is relevant for the viewers. It's not too partisan. Everything's kind of parsed and broken down, and they are more trusting of the news because the news wasn't always as partisan as it is today and wasn't always so flagrantly, brokenly partisan. And they don't realize that now we have these different algorithms that once they find out what bucket you fall into, they're going to purely feed you things that are going to get you to respond. So you're going to get, if you've got older people that tend to lean right, your news feed is just going to be a barrage of the most inflammatory right-wing culture crap that's going to get you to share it. And they believe that. I don't think a lot of times they step back and think like, is this stuff I'm being fed? Is this the actual news, or is this just stories that people are writing because they're going to get clicks, and this is what's being given to me because the almighty algorithm has deemed that I'm going to click on it and share it?
Yeah, I think you're right. That's a really good point, because in their life experience, the news doesn't lie.
Yeah.
There was no fake news until the early 2000s, maybe the earliest. They don't have any experience of that. They don't understand that they're just being blatantly fucking lied to, probably.
Yeah, they're used to Walter Cronkite coming in and telling them how it is. And the stories that Walter Cronkite would bring you, he's going to sit down and he's going to disseminate, and they're going to view it as he's giving you a fair analysis of some left wing and some right wing, and he's going to try to just give it to you as straight as he can. And that just doesn't happen today. But I think they're so pre-programmed and wired to accept information in that manner. They're not as savvy to the modern information economy, really. This is money we're talking about. Stories are designed to have you share them on, especially right-wing story, like shit that older right-wing people that I know, the stories that they're getting are written and designed to have them shared on Facebook. Yeah. They're Facebook stories. And, and they're very good at that. These algorithms are incredibly well designed to appeal to parts of our psyche that, we're not even aware of.
People like the Daily Wire will buy these targeted ads that is an article that they think is, see, this is what I was getting ready to say. We need to make a legal classification called news. And in order to use that term, your company needs to be, one, nonprofit, and two, vetted for truthfulness and accuracy by somebody. And you can't have companies like Fox pretending that they're fucking news anymore. Because the term news used to mean fact, like they were synonymous. I'm going to watch the news. The news meant what is happening in the real world, not in the fucking fake made up world. Is that a viable solution?
I don't think it's viable at all. Could you imagine
Why not?
Could you imagine the reaction of Tucker Carlson if Joe Biden says he's going to create a ministry of the news where they're going to vet everything Tucker says to ensure that it's palatable to be fed to the American people? Conservatives would freak the fuck out. They would
couldn't
start
do
making
it. Fox couldn't do it because they would have to go nonprofit. So they would have to drop they would have to drop news out of their name.
Which is why they would get all of their old people that vote really fucking riled up, and they would keep it from ever even happening. They would start making allusions to 1984 that they don't know what they're talking about because they've never read 1984, and and it would get killed in a fucking heartbeat. No doubt about it.
Fair enough.
So that's why you have to go under the radar. You have to get education. Start off real early. It's a 20, 30-year project.
All right. Let's look at some tops. Start off here with cable news. What do you think the top cable news show is, Tony? Tucker?
I'm going to go with Tucker, yeah. I think top news shows, it's got to be Tucker. I know Fox News is like the big one, right? And I believe Tuck, he's the top Fox News guy.
Yeah, this is for this quarter. The Fox 5 is number one. We're talking cable news here. The 5, which is weekdays at 5. It's on weekdays at 5 p.m. So this is not a primetime show, but it is currently number one somehow.
Well, that's right before their target demographic's bedtime.
I guess so.
So that makes sense. It's like our 9 p.m., 10 p.m. show. Theirs is at 5.
It's on right after Judge Judy.
It's Judge Judy, local news, Fox 5, bed.
Yeah.
Take your blood pressure medicine, then bed.
Often Tucker is 1, but Tucker's 2 this quarter. Number 3 is Hannity, Sean Hannity. I think it's just called Hannity. Out of the top 10, the top 8 are all Fox News shows. The top 8 cable news shows are all Fox News shows. Number 9 is Rachel Maddow, and Fox News is number 10.
Okay.
So 9 out of the top 10 are Fox News. Top 8 all Fox News, and you got Rachel Maddow in there at 9. She is right at if I remember, it's right around 1 million.
Okay. Didn't she just quit recently too?
I think she announced her something. I want to say retirement, but I could be wrong about that.
Yeah, for some reason she's the only non-conservative personality that draws any viewership on the legacy media outlets.
Yeah, I think she was the first one that started doing the partisan stuff, right? On the Democratic side.
Yeah, I think it was like when MSNBC decided to be the anti-Fox News, or the left-wing Democrat Fox News, I guess. Well, no, it was Keith Olbermann. He was the first, and Rachel come up behind Keith Olbermann.
I don't remember Olbermann that well. Was he that partisan?
Dude, oh, buddy. We'll have to go over Olbermann.
I have fond memories of him. I don't remember why.
Dude. He would have those just grandiose, verbose nightly segments where he would sit down and start talking like this, and then he'd look up at this camera over here and have a few more things, and he'd look over, and we'll have to watch some of those old ones at some point. They're so good.
How about YouTube? Let's check out Social Blade, top news and politics shows on YouTube.
Top news and politics on YouTube.
And these are legacy linked ones. These aren't like, Sam Cedar's show is not on here and stuff like that, obviously.
Okay. Legacy. I'm going to go with Tucker again. I feel like he's got to be up there. He's got to be huge, even in this space.
They don't have it broken down by individual personalities. They have it broken down by the broadcasts. So the first American news and politics YouTube channel is CBS News, which is a Fox subsidiary, obviously. Coming in at CBS is 14, and then coming in next, the second U.S. Channel is Fox News. So the top 2 are both Fox, basically. Then you have Inside Edition clocking in at 11 million subs, 11 million views, 19 million subs.
I haven't listened to CBS in so long. Like, I don't even know who their personalities are. I mean, you say that they're owned by Fox, but they're not.
They're less.
Are they
hacky.
as yeah, I was gonna say they're not like so explicitly partisan. I don't think as Fox. Or certainly, you don't hear about it. Like I never hear about any big names on CBS coming up as being in the as causing any outrage anywhere.
I think they own Inside Edition too. They do some they have all the investigative stuff, Catch a Predator and all that shit. I think at CBS they have some real journalism. Yeah, and 34th, and MSNBC is 34th down here with 5.15 million views for the month. I think this is for the month. Oh, this is subs.
Jesus Christ, that's so low.
8 million views for the month. 8.4 for MSNBC.
I mean, like Joe Rogan gets that. Oh yeah. Like on one podcast a week.
Well, nobody watches real news on YouTube. They watch
They do from time. So actually, speaking of CBS, every once in a while, I'll catch 60 Minutes.
60 Minutes has some good ones. Yeah.
Any of those the CBS Sunday morning shit. The non-political. It was great real TV programming. At least it used to be back in the day.
I think out of all of them, ABC is doing the best for their live news on YouTube. Nobody else is really doing live news on there that's any good.
Well, I guess a lot of them are wanting to. It could be maybe because a lot of them are trying to do their own app, so maybe they're just not putting that much into the YouTube programming.
Who's the? Do you watch ABC at all? Oh, okay, they have a really good one of their main guys. He's very compelling. I don't know why I like him, but he's just very compelling. He makes the most mundane fucking stories interesting. Facebook doesn't make most of their analytics public, as we know. The only thing that you can really track on Facebook is engagement, which is shares, likes, that sort of thing. They have CrowdTangle, which is they bought out, which provides some statistics to the public. This one is tough because it changes. There's somebody who actually tracks this shit. His name is Kevin Roos, and he posts a daily top 10 on Twitter. Let's see what we got today. Oh, NASA. That's an unusual one. Coming in at number 1 here.
NASA?
Yeah, then you have some animal stuff, a K-pop, The Federalist, assuming that's Federalist Society right-wing stuff, CNN. Facebook has tried to even the playing field out manually because it was so crazy right-wing. Yesterday, NPR coming in at number 1. This was surprising. I don't know what the story was, but usually these are linked to some big story or some big piece they do.
Yeah.
Here's Occupy Democrats. I don't know if you follow them, but... there's Occupy Democrats popping up. They usually have some shareable shit they try to come up with. PR to Occupies. Yesterday was good for the Democrats. Day before that, we have 11 Alive, which is a right-wing pro-cop channel. Fox News, then Newsmax, Fox News again, number 10, Charlie Kirk. So this was a right-wing throwing heaters on the 22nd here.
Fucking Charlie Kirk.
11 Alive.
Yeah, he wasn't
number 1. Yeah, it's more even than it used to be, but it's 75% of these are typically right-wing dominated, if you go through them here. But again, these are propelled. These numbers are propelled by one. Typically, it's one big post that really gets a lot of engagement.
Yeah. I guess long-term trends, though, are they still the same? So I guess they use the algorithm to, I don't know how that would work, to manipulate the...
No, what they did was they started implementing fact checks, and that really put a damper on the right-wing shareability of a lot of this shit. They don't boost stuff that it gets fact-checked as false like they used to because they were facing lawsuits and shit. After Jan 6th, there's liability there.
I would be interested to really dig in at some point to how they go about fact-checking. What they would choose to fact-check and how they would go about doing it. How they would...
I think people will have to report it, and then they go through PolitiFact is who they use for their... I think all the companies use PolitiFact for the most part. I know Twitter does. I believe Facebook does too. Speaking of PolitiFact gets shit on by the right because they're liberal or whatever, which is not the case.
Because they call bullshit on all the right-wing nonsense, which obviously means that they're run by Joe Biden.
So PolitiFact has statistics on certain individuals that are prominent and get accused of misinformation fairly often. So we're going to start off with Rachel Maddow here. What's her scorecard looking like? If you had to guess, what do you think? What do you think overall her score would be?
Rachel Maddow?
Okay, so the way they do it is they have a category for all these. They have true, mostly true, half true, mostly false, false, and pants on fire. That's their rankings of facts.
Yeah, so I would give Maddow a mostly true, and that she represents the stories that she's relaying to people in a truthful manner, but she curates the stories that she chooses to represent to pick stories that are going to be beneficial to her team. But when she does pick them, she does a good job at relaying the facts.
Well, you have to bear in mind too that they're only adding stories that people want fact checked to the calculation. You understand what I'm saying? They're not fact checking everything she says. They're fact checking what gets reported to them to check on. So
that kind of throws a monkey wrench in there.
Yeah,
but I'm going to stick with my guns.
Yeah, you're pretty much right. I mean, it's 24% false, 7 checks. Only 1 check was pants on fire at 3% here. The rest are spread out evenly, basically, among true through mostly false. Here's one of her false ones. On March 1st in 2021, she claimed, while he was president, President Trump never encouraged Americans to get vaccinated. This was false. He did encourage Americans to get vaccinated at some point, apparently. Here's another false one from Maddow. Under Scott Walker, the Wisconsin middle class is shrinking at a faster rate than any other state in the country. PolitiFact ranked this is false as well. Pretty even across the board, though.
Okay.
How about Sean Hannity? What do you think about that one?
Oh, buddy. I can't imagine. Yeah, he's got to be very close to pants on fire, like mostly false.
Sean Hannity.
I mean, of course, like I say, there's a big part of media bias is curating the stories to present a certain narrative. And you can be truthful in certain curated stories, but I know my Sean Hannity, and he likes to make some shit up.
Not too bad here, honestly. Only 1 check was pants on fire from Hannity. That's pretty good for a right-winger on my books. 43% false. Almost half false.
Yeah, that's not surprising.
He's got a few true ones, though. Let's see what we got here. Here's a false one. Donald Trump authorized up to 20,000 National Guard troops to protect the Capitol before Jan 6th, but was rejected by Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer. This was false. This is completely fabricated. Conservatives gained Twitter followers after the company announced its deal with Elon Musk because Twitter lifted a broad anti-conservative, anti-Trump shadow ban. This is completely false. There was no shadow ban completely lifted with Musk announcing his potential Twitter deal. That doesn't even make sense, really. I'm looking for a pants on fire one here. These are all false. If you look pre-COVID under President Donald Trump, we didn't import a single barrel of oil from Saudi Arabia. Completely false. Who writes this?
I don't even know why they would say that.
That doesn't even make. Of course, we import fucking tons of oil from Saudi Arabia. Obviously.
I wonder if maybe the statement, and I don't even know if this is true, but that we were exporting more than we were importing.
Yeah, there's a net, right.
Yeah, like net, it was
0 or less than
we
0,
were
maybe.
exporting. Yeah, we were exporting more than we were importing.
But this is just a lie, right? On a supposed news show. How is this legal?
Yeah,
this should be illegal. He should be in fucking jail. You can't lie to the people. Put him in the fucking gulags.
Lie about oil, straight to jail. Did you ever watch Portlandia?
No.
Okay, there's a great, what's the guy's name? Fred Armiston. There's a great little skit that he does where he's like a Venezuelan captain or whatever, and he's like talking about all the things that you do. You go straight to jail. He's like, you overcook fish, straight to jail. You undercook fish, straight to jail. You lie about the weather, straight to jail. No, so we need that character to be in charge of your ministry of truth, James. That's what I'm saying.
Yes.
Straight to jail. You lie about the oil, straight to jail.
Not a joke. Ilhan Omar tells residents, quote, "You don't have to be registered to vote in Minnesota." Completely false. Okay. All right. That's Hannity. How about Tucker Carlson?
Oh, Tuck.
He's got to be worse than Rachel Maddow, surely, right?
I think so, but I think he's not going to be as bad as Hannity. I think Tucker, he's going to do more of his misrepresentation through the curation and through the creative interpretation of the stories, as opposed to the outright bullshitting like Hannity. I think he's going to have plenty of outright bullshitting, but not as much as somebody like Hannity.
So Hannity had 43% false here. You should know me. Of course, I'm going to put the worst one last because that's how I organize these segments. Tucker Carlson, the third, right?
Something like that.
31% pants on fire, 40% false.
And so what do we learn from this, James? PolitiFact is obviously run by the Biden campaign.
Right. Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer run PolitiFact.
It's the only explanation.
Not a single person in the crowd on January 6th was found to be carrying a firearm. Not one. Federal agents directly incited people on January 6th, 2021, and intentionally entrapped American citizens. Here's a pants on fire one. Jan 6th is being used as a pretext to strip millions of Americans, disfavored Americans, of their core constitutional rights.
Okay, what constitutional rights?
I guess this is pants on fire because it's so incendiary and just blatantly lying to get people riled up.
Huh. I mean, I guess the people that are going to go to jail, it's stripping them of their constitutional rights, but I have imagined that's not the idea he was trying to elicit from that statement.
The strategy you want to use, Tony, is when you tell a lie, you say the lie, and then you say, it's true. That's what Tucker does. It now appears there actually was meaningful voter fraud in Fulton County, Georgia last November. That is not a conspiracy theory. It's true.
Turns out it was a conspiracy theory.
I love watching Tucker, honestly, to be honest with you.
Really?
I know it's like a waste of time or whatever, but just his mannerisms and everything. It's like watching it's like after the rapture, like after all the nice people go up to heaven and all of us are left on this shitty fucking hellscape of a planet. This is the news show that I'm going to be watching. This will be the only thing on TV. It's just Tucker lying about random bullshit.
I get it. I mean, I like listening to Charlie Kirk and Ben Shapiro. I can only do it in like 5 minute segments. It was like any more than that, and I could feel my anxiety starting to well, and I have to turn it off. I walk around yelling for like 5 minutes, but those 5 minutes where I can stand it, I do enjoy it, laughing at it.
The Europeans have discovered that the real threat to human civilization is not global warming. It never was global warming. The real threat to people is global cooling, otherwise known as winter. Far more people freeze to death every year than die of heat.
How they get you? They're under the goddamn ground.